Driving to the Hoops Basketball Diaries. This is Clint. Hope you had a good week. It's starting to kind of get a little warmer, and then it'll freeze up again at nights, but getting a little weather change up here. Spring's right around the corner, the spring equinox. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about some small forwards, kind of the utility players of the NBA. Usually your small forwards are your most versatile players. You could theoretically have a team, a starting five of all small forwards. It's usually they're so good at everything, or at least solid at everything, that they can handle the ball, they can shoot, they can bang in the paint, they can even, get some shots blocked or block shots and that kind of thing. So they're just the overall kind of utility, good at everything kind of players. So, and speaking chronologically, to me, the first great small forward who just really stood out was a great scorer, great rebounder. He scored, did he have 61 in the finals? And I think he had 73 in a game, 71 or 73 in a game. He could just really fill it up. And for the time, he was a high flyer. Now, by today's standards, he probably wouldn't have been. His name was Elgin Baylor. Played his career with the Lakers. Played side by side with Jerry West. They never won a championship together. West did in 1972, which was actually the year Baylor retired, but he retired before like the midway point in the season, so he didn't get the ring and he didn't get credit for that. But Elgin was just an amazing player. He was a high rebounder for a guy his size, 6'4", 6'5". He could dunk really well for the time. Like I said, a high flyer, had some hang time, kind of the first player with some hang time. He could do a lot around the basket if he could get through the paint. Decent shooter, that sort of thing. Good passer too, underrated passer. And then he kind of was like the first standard of small forwards. And then you had, like, right after him, it was John Havlicek showed up. Again, a great utility type player who could do it all. Great scorer, solid rebounder, solid passer, clutch. He won, I think he won at least 8 championships, and not all under Bill Russell's era. Two of his championships were after Russell retired, so further proven that he was that much of a winner and that great of a player. He kind of come from that Red Auerbach pedigree, from the 60s, and he was actually a six-man in most of his early part of his career, but a lot of times he would lead his team in scoring despite being the six-man, so it's kind of interesting. Again, clutch player, had some great playoff moments, highlights, things like that. Another great player kind of that era, if you were to skip a little bit further along, it would have been the greatest ABA player ever, and that's Julius Erving, one of my favorites personally. And he came into the NBA later, but he started in the ABA in the early 70s with the Virginia Squires. And you talk about a guy, I did a video on him, but you talk about a guy who just changed the landscape of basketball. He is, to me, the most important, most influential player ever as far as when you're looking at styles. I know Jordan did a lot for the game as far as expanding it globally and that sort of thing, but Dr. J's style of play still lingers today. And if you go back and you look some of his highlights and some of his games, especially early in his career, he was just amazing still by today's standards. Great scorer in the ABA, and then come to the NBA. His scoring dropped in the NBA, but he was such a winner, it kind of made up for it. He was averaging up around 30 in the ABA, but then he comes to the NBA and he had these loaded teams. So they were going to the finals. Like, he went to the finals at least, 77, 1980, 82, 83, like 3 or 4 times he went to the finals and won it once finally in 1983 when Moses Malone got there. So great player, game changer, monolithic player, one of the greats. And then also around the time, a little before Dr. J, I probably should have mentioned him first, but he played for a couple of teams. His name was Rick Barry, and this was a guy that wasn't very popular. But when you talk about sharpshooters and you talk about just great basketball players, Rick Barry is up there as one of the all-time greats. I mean, he could fill it up. He could shoot it from range. He was probably one of the best free throw shooters ever. He shot it granny style. I don't know if you've ever seen him shoot free throws, but he literally shot free throws granny style, and he was hitting up around 90%. So he tried to teach some of the centers back then how to shoot free throws, but it didn't look cool, so they weren't going to do it at that time. Had Rick Barry played during the three-point era, in his last year they did have the three-point shot, but in 1980 season, but the previous 12 or 13 seasons of his career, there was no three-point line. Now, he did play in the ABA a year or two, so you will see a break in that in his NBA stats with ABA stats, and he shot threes there. But if that had been like the common part of the game, he would have been easily one of the best small forwards by far, because it just would have played to his game to have that three-point shot like that. So great free throw shooter. Like I said, one thing about Rick Barry is that he won a championship in 1975 with the Warriors, and he averaged like 30, 31 a game, solid rebounds, of course, great free throws, wins the championship, and still does not win the MVP award. Kind of got robbed there. Again, like I said at the beginning, he wasn't a very popular player, so that's part of that. So it's kind of a shame he didn't win the 1975 NBA MVP award. And then, of course, to me, the next small forward is my favorite. I don't know if he's the greatest. I'd love to debate that with someone, but Larry Bird in 1980 season when he showed up, he just took the NBA by storm. Total, just kind of a freak how he played. Didn't have a ton of athletic ability, although people like to act like he couldn't jump over a Manhattan phone book. He could dunk. I mean, he was pretty athletic. People underestimate. He was real quick, real savvy, great shooter, really good rebounder. I mean, he averaged 10 rebounds a game for his career, 6-7 assists, which is good, and then about 24 points a game. And just an amazing clutch player. Had he not had the injuries the last, 89, 90, 91, 92, the last 3 or 4 seasons, he would have averaged better numbers. He still was up around 20 points a game, but his scoring dropped because he was injured. His back was so bad. And he probably would have played an additional 2 to 4 seasons, who knows, had he not been injured. But a lot of what ifs with players. But he had a good career, 13 seasons, 3-time MVP, 3-time champion, made it to the finals, 81, 84, 85, 86, 87. So 5 times he went to the championship finals, and was just a great player, clutch, probably the greatest clutch player ever. I know Jordan's in that conversation, Jerry West, Kobe, a couple other players. But he's up there for sure. And then a couple other guys I'll sprinkle in there, like James Worthy was great, good complimentary player for Magic. Dominique Wilkins, the franchise player of franchise players in Atlanta, just a great scorer, great dunker. A little overrated. He used to be underrated. Now they've corrected that too much, and now I think he's a little overrated, Dominique. He never made it past like the second round of the playoffs. Just great individual player, but not a winner. Not a guy who's going to take you to the promised land. Not terribly clutch in any way. I'm sure he had some buzzer beaters here and there, but his main thing was he scored, and he scored a lot, and he dunked. He had some great in-game dunks. Some still regard him as the best in-game dunker, which good argument there for sure. So, you know, you had some other guys sprinkled in. Chris Mullin, great shooter. He kind of spread the floor. A lot of the small forwards throughout the 80s kind of become outside players and shooters and things like that. They had good size, you know, and then could stretch the floor out with their shooting too. So Larry Bird kind of being the forefather of that. His rookie season's when the three-point line started. You know, so that's just a couple of old school guys. Scottie Pippen, one of the greatest small forwards of all time. So if you were gonna just do a old school small forward starting five kind of thing, I think Scottie Pippen could run your point guard. Like, he was that good of a ball handler and could facilitate an offense good enough and defend smaller players. I mean, he could guard someone quick like John Stockton or Isaiah Thomas or someone like that. He was that good. Good scorer too. Great defender. Not a guy who's gonna, you know, the year that Jordan wasn't there in the '94 season, I think a lot of people expected a little more out of Pippen, but he kind of tried to do it all, and you know, he didn't have the greatest season that we thought he would. I thought when Jordan left that Pippen was going to suddenly average 30 a game and 8 rebounds and 8 assists, like he was just going to blow up, but he didn't. He had a good season, don't get me wrong, and he was high in MVP votes, but not quite what we thought. And then, you know, to skip a generation there, if I shoot up here to more modern times, when you're talking about small forwards, I guess he's the greatest. I hate to concede that, but but LeBron James is so good, and I've said that for years. It's scary how good LeBron James is. When you look at his size, his athletic ability, his jumping, solid shooter, good rebounder, good offensive facilitator. One thing about his assists, when people compare him to Larry Bird, is he does average more assists than Bird, but Larry Bird didn't control the offense as much like LeBron. LeBron's more of a point forward, and Larry was more of a forward, small forward, like, you know what I mean? Like, he played in the paint a lot, and his passes come off kind of through the flow of the game. LeBron, he's facilitating the offense. Larry was competing for assists with someone, a Hall of Fame point guard, and Dennis Johnson, and before that with Tiny Archibald. Tiny loved to facilitate the offense, so there was no way that Larry was going to average 8-10 assists a game with two great point guards on his teams at different points in his career. So that's something to keep in mind when people compare the two. LeBron's biggest knock, the last few years he's gotten better about this, but for a while he would struggle in big moments. But he's kind of gotten all that under control, and he you know, just to say it bluntly, he's the best small forward ever. Is he the guy I would choose if I was creating a team? Not necessarily. Maybe. I really love Bird. If I was going to pick between the two, I would probably pick Bird because of how great he was in big moments. But LeBron, he's just such a beast. Quarters 1 through 3.5, you know, that it'd be hard to turn him away too. But Bird, you know, would come up big in the fourth or hit some game winners and big shots that maybe LeBron didn't historically do as much. So anyway, I know I'm missing a lot of guys, but I love the small forward position. That's what I wanted to play in high school, but because I was the tallest guy on my team, I had to play center a lot of times. So I'm like 6'4", but I wanted to be a small forward or shooting guard so bad. I wanted to play wing, but it never happened. But that was the best position because they could kind of do it all. You know, it was just a cool position. But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please, please, please like the video and subscribe. And we'll see you next time. You guys have a good weekend.